The final page of this tale is dated to the 15th year of an unnamed king, likely one of the Ptolemies. At least 2 manuscripts of the story are known, both fragments now housed in the Cairo Museum. The first manuscript was discovered and published by Mariette using a facsimile created by Emil Broch. Later, Krall also worked on this version, comparing it with the original. It consists of 6 numbered pages, though the first 2 are missing entirely, and the beginning of each line on the 3rd page has been lost. The second manuscript was found by Spiegelberg among scattered sheets from the Fayum. He later published it in the Cairo Museum catalog. This version is severely damaged, making it difficult to piece together any complete sentence describing Satni's journey into the tomb of Neferkafta. The first manuscript has been translated several times. H. Broch rendered it into French in a study published in an archaeological journal. Lepage Renouf presented an English version based on Broch's work. E. Revelat provided a word-for-word translation of the Demotic text, complete with historical and grammatical commentary. G. Maspero transcribed a portion of the story into hieroglyphs and later translated nearly the entire tale, except for the first 8 lines of the existing fragment. His translation appeared in a scholarly publication and was read at a classical studies association meeting in France. H. Broch also published a German version of the story in a literary journal. E. Revelat published The Romance of Setna in the Revue archéologique in Etienne-Babé Tichujou, and it was later issued as a separate edition by Didier in a 24-page volume with 1 illustration. Jean-Jacques Hess produced a detailed edition titled The Demotic Romance of Satni-Khamois in 1888, which included the original text, translation, commentary, and glossary. Published in Leipzig, Flinders Petrie included the tale in his 1895 Egyptian Tales. Volume 2, issued in London. A few years later, in 1898, F.L.L. Griffith published the story of Setna in Specimen Pages of the World's Best Literature in New York. Griffith also compiled a larger collection in 1900 titled Stories of the High Priests of Memphis, which brought together the tales of Sethen, as mentioned by Herodotus, and the Demotic Legends of Khamois. This work was released by the Clarendon Press in Oxford. A Weidman offered a version of the tale in Ancient Egyptian Legends and Fairy Tales. Published in Leipzig in 1906, Lau returned to the tale in articles featured in the Review, Age of. Further developing his interpretation of the story, known as The Romance of Satni-Khamois, one of the early translations by Revelat, was later adapted for a wider audience by Rosny in his book Tabubu, released in 1892 as part of the small Guillaume collection in Paris. A notable theme from the tale of the resurrection of an Egyptian princess returning to seek vengeance on an adversary was later echoed in Marie Corelli's novel Siska. One of her more fantastical works, the name of the scribe responsible for the manuscript has been analyzed by J. Krall, who discussed it in a volume dedicated to Professor Liebmans. Krall suggested the name might be read as Ziharpto. Interpretation remains uncertain. The name does, however, appear on some Ptolemaic era monuments. I have reconstructed the opening portion of the story up to the point where the surviving text of the first manuscript begins based on common narrative formulas used throughout the rest of the tale. In doing so, I also drew upon Spiegelberg's analysis of specific narrative elements he managed to recover from the second, more damaged manuscript. A note marks the point at which the reconstruction ends and the preserved text of the original story begins. Once there lived a king named Usimarisme. He live, prosper, and be well. This king had a son named Satni-Khamois, whose foster brother was a man called Pharaohs. Satni-Khamois was deeply educated in all areas of knowledge. He often wandered through the necropolis of Memphis, where he spent his time studying the sacred texts, the writings from the double house of life, and the inscriptions engraved on stele and temple walls. He was well-versed in the powers of amulets and protective charms, skilled in crafting them and composing potent magical texts. Satni-Khamois was a magician without equal throughout the land of Egypt. One day, as Satni was walking through the open courtyard of the temple of Ptah, reading the inscriptions carved there, a man of noble appearance nearby suddenly began to laugh. Satni turned to him and asked, "Why are you laughing at me?" The man replied, "I'm not laughing at you, but how can I help myself when you spend your time studying these writings, which hold no real power?" If you truly wish to read a text with power, come with me. I can take you to a place where a book lies, a book written by Thoth himself. It will elevate you to a status just below that of the gods. This book contains 2 spells. If you recite the first, you will command the heavens, the earth, the realm of the dead, the mountains, and the waters. You will understand the language of all birds and reptiles, no matter how many there are. Even the fish will rise to the surface, so you may see them, drawn up by divine force. If you read the second spell, even from within your tomb, you will regain your form as it was in life. You will witness the rising sun, the divine cycle of its gods, and see the moon in its full glory when it appears. Satni responded, by my life, tell me what you ask in return, and I will do it. Just lead me to the place where this book is kept, the nobleman said. The book is not mine. It lies deep within the necropolis, in the tomb of Neferkefta, son of King Merenethus. But beware, if you try to take it, he will make you return it. Walking with a forked stick and a staff in your hands and a lit brazier on your head, from the moment the nobleman spoke, Satni was consumed by the idea. He no longer knew peace. He went before the king and repeated everything the nobleman had told him. The king asked, "What is it you want?" Satni replied, "Allow me to descend into the tomb of Neferkefta, son of King Merenethus. I will take my foster brother Inaros with me, and we shall retrieve the book." So Satni and Inaros went to the necropolis of Memphis. For 3 days and 3 nights, they searched through the tombs, reading the stelae from the double house of life and reciting their inscriptions. On the 3rd day, Satni finally recognized the place where Neferkefta had been buried. Once they had identified the tomb, Satni recited a spell over it. The earth split open, and he descended into the chamber where the book lay. What Satni first saw upon entering is unknown. From a surviving fragment discovered by Spiegelberg, it seems that the man he had met in the forecourt of the Temple of Ptah was actually Neferkefta himself. Neferkefta had only temporarily placed his wife and son in the tomb with him, but wished for them to remain there permanently. He intended to use Satni to help transfer their mummies from Coptos, where they had originally been buried, to the necropolis at Memphis. However, in his eagerness to enter the tomb, Satni had neglected the proper rituals and was unable to open the door. Then Neferkefta appeared and revealed the sacrificial offerings that the spirits of the dead required. Guided by crows and vultures, Satni was safely led to the designated spot. Where the birds landed, he found a stone, which he lifted, revealing the hidden entrance to the tomb. Upon entering, he found the chamber filled with radiant light, as though the sun itself were shining inside. The light came from the Book of Thoth, illuminating everything around it. Neferkefta was not alone. His wife Ahuri and their son Mahet were with him. Though their physical bodies still lay buried in Coptos, their spiritual doubles were present with him, sustained by the power of the Book of Thoth. As Satni stepped into the tomb, Ahuri rose and addressed him, asking, "Who are you?" He replied, "I am Satni-Khamois, son of King Osiris. I have come for the Book of Thoth, which I see placed between you and Neferkefta. Hand it over, otherwise I will take it by force," Ahuri answered. "I beg you, do not be so hasty. First, listen to the misfortunes that this book has brought upon us. Do not demand it so lightly, for it was because of this very book that we were robbed of our time on earth. My name is Ahuri, daughter of King Merenethus, and the man you see here with me is my brother Neferkefta. We were born of the same father and mother. Our parents had no other children besides us. **** When I came of age to marry. I was brought before the king during a time of celebration. I was richly adorned, and many thought me beautiful. The king said, 'Look, Ahuri, our daughter is grown. It is time to find her a husband. To whom shall we give her in marriage?' But I loved my brother Neferkefta deeply and wanted no husband but him. I told this to my mother, who went to speak with the king. She said, 'Ahuri, our daughter, loves her elder brother Neferkefta. Let us marry them according to custom.' When the king heard her, he replied, 'You have only 2 children, and you want them to marry each other. Wouldn't it be better to marry Ahuri to the son of an infantry general, and Neferkefta to the daughter of another?' My mother answered, 'Why argue with me? Even if I have no more children, is it not the tradition to marry them?' 'Very.' Well then, let Neneferkifter marry a general's daughter, and Ahuri marry a general's son. May this bring good fortune to our family." As the festival in Pharaoh's presence began, someone came to bring me there. I was troubled in spirit and no longer had the joy I felt the day before. Pharaoh looked at me and said, "Weren't you the one who sent me those foolish words? Marry me to my elder brother Neneferkifter." I answered, "Fine, let me marry the son of a general, and let Neneferkifter marry the daughter of another. May it be for the best." I laughed. Pharaoh laughed. Then Pharaoh turned to the royal steward and said, "Wife," and Pharaoh ordered that a great dowry of gold and silver be sent with me. The servants of the royal household delivered the gifts. Neneferkifter was joyful. He welcomed the servants, and that very night he lay with me. He found me a virgin, and he loved me deeply, as I loved him. When the time of my monthly purification came, I found I had no need for it. Word was sent to Pharaoh, and his heart was filled with joy. He sent me precious gifts, gold, silver, and fine linen from the royal treasury. And when the time came for me to give birth, I delivered the child you see before you, House of Life. Many days passed, and my brother Neneferkifter spent most of his time wandering through the necropolis of Memphis. He devoted himself to reading the writings found in the tombs of the pharaohs and on the stelae of the scribes of the double House of Life. A grand procession held in honor of the god Ptah, Neneferkifter, entered the temple to offer prayers. And as he walked behind the procession, he began to read the inscriptions carved on the chapels of the gods. While he was doing so, an old man noticed him and began to laugh. Neneferkifter turned to him and asked, "But how can I keep from laughing when you spend your time reading inscriptions that have no real power? If you truly wish to study a writing of true power, come with me. I can take you to a place where there is a book written by Thoth himself, back when he walked the earth with the gods. This book contains 2 spells. If you recite the first, you will be able to enchant the heavens, the earth, the underworld, the mountains, and the waters. You will understand the speech of all birds and reptiles, no matter how many there are. You will even see the fish of the deep, as divine power will cause them to rise to the surface of the water. If you read the second spell, even after you have died, you will regain your earthly form, responded by the life of the king. Tell me what reward you wish, and I will see that it is given to you only. Lead me to the place where the book is hidden." The priest said, "If you truly want me to guide you to the book, you must give me 100 pieces of silver for my burial. And you must also have 2 coffins made for me, as would befit a wealthy priest." Neneferkifter summoned a servant and ordered that the priest be given the 100 silver pieces. He also had the 2 coffins made, just as the priest requested. Once everything had been done, the priest said to him, "The book lies deep in the sea of Koptos, sealed inside an iron chest, that, in turn, is within a chest of ivory and ebony, which is enclosed in a silver chest. Serpents, and an immortal serpent is coiled tightly around it." From the moment the priest spoke to Neneferkifter, it was as if he lost all sense of where he was. He left the temple and came to speak with me about everything that had happened. Once I return, I will never leave the northern lands again. But I turned angrily to the priest and said, "You should fear the wrath of Ammon for what you've said to Neneferkifter. You've stirred up conflict, you've brought strife into my life, and now Thebes has become a place of misfortune for me." He went straight to Pharaoh and repeated everything the priest had told him. Pharaoh asked, "What is it you desire?" "Mahat, with me to the south. I will return with the book, and I will never leave the north again." Pharaoh granted his request, and the fully prepared royal vessel was given to him. We boarded it, set out on our journey, and arrived at Koptos. When news of our arrival reached the priests of Isis and their high priest, they came down to greet Neneferkifter without delay, and their wives came to meet me. We disembarked and went to the temple of Isis and Harpocrates. Neneferkifter brought offerings, bull, a goose, and Wynan performed rites and libations before the gods. Afterward, we were brought to a beautiful house filled with every kind of luxury. Neneferkifter spent 5 days enjoying himself with the priests of Isis, while their wives kept me company. On the morning of the 6th day, Neneferkifter had a large amount of pure wax brought before him. He crafted a model boat from it, complete with rowers and sailors, then spoke a spell over them, bringing them to life and giving them breath. He set the wax boat afloat on the water and filled the royal boat with sand. Then he said goodbye to me, boarded the vessel, and I stayed behind on the shores of the Sea of Koptos, saying to myself, I know what fate awaits him. He said, Rowers, take me to the place where the book lies, and they rowed for him tirelessly both day and night. After 3 days of travel, he cast sand in front of him, and a deep opening appeared in the river. There he found a swarm of serpents, scorpions, and all sorts of crawling creatures surrounding the chest that held the book. Around the chest itself was a great eternal serpent. Then he approached the eternal serpent. He attacked and killed Itba. The serpent revived and returned to life. He struck again, killing it a second time, but it came back once more. On the third attack, he cut the serpent into 2 pieces and placed sand between them. This time, the serpent died and could no longer return to its original form. Neneferkifta then reached the chest and saw that it was made of iron. He opened it and found another chest inside this one of bronze. He opened the bronze one and found a chest of cinnamon wood. Inside that, he discovered one made of ivory and ebony. Finally, within the gold chest was the book itself. *** he removed. The book recited one of its spells and instantly enchanted the sky, the earth, the underworld, the mountains, and the waters. He understood the speech of the birds in the sky, the fish in the water, and the animals on the mountains. Then he spoke the other spell written in the book, and saw the sun rising into the sky along with its divine entourage, the moon ascending, and the stars appearing in their true forms. He even beheld the fish deep beneath the waters, for a divine presence rested above them. He then cast a spell over the river, which returned to its normal state. Boarding the boat again, he said to the rowers, Take me back to where Ahuri is. They rowed tirelessly day and night. In 3 days, he arrived at my side, where I sat by the waters of Koptos. I had not eaten or drunk. I did nothing, as if I already lived in the realm of the dead. I said to Neneferkifta, I too enchanted the sky, the earth, the underworld, the mountains, and the waters. I could understand the speech of birds, fish, and 4-legged beasts. I read the second spell, and saw the sun rise with its gods, the moon ascend, and all the stars in their constellations. I beheld the fish of the deep, over which a divine presence hovered, but I could not write, so I told my elder brother Neneferkifta, who was a skilled scribe and a wise man. It in water, drank it, and instantly understood everything the book contained. We returned to Koptos that very day, and celebrated joyfully before Isis of Koptos and Harpocrates. Then we boarded the boat and set off. We had just reached the northern outskirts of Koptos, about a sheen's distance away, when Thoth became aware of everything that had happened to Neneferkifta concerning the book. Wasting no time, Thoth went before Ra and said, Know this, my rights and my laws have been violated by Neneferkifta, son of King Merenethus. He entered my sanctuary, stole my chest containing the book of spells, and killed the guardian, who protected it. Ra was told, He and all that he possesses are yours. So a divine decree was issued from heaven. Neneferkifta and all who are with him shall not return safely to Memphis. At that very moment, the young boy Mahat stepped out from under the awning of Pharaoh's bark and fell into the river. As he fell, he praised Ra, and everyone on board cried out in alarm. Neneferkifta rushed out from the cabin, recited a spell over the child, and lifted him back out of the water, for a divine power hovered over it. He chanted another spell, compelling the boy to recount everything that had happened, and to repeat the accusation that Thoth had brought before. We sailed back to Koptos with the child. We carried him to the house of the dead, made sure he was properly cared for, had him embalmed, as befits someone of great importance, and laid him to rest in a coffin in the cemetery of Koptos. Then my brother Neneferkifta said, Let us leave. We must not delay our return, lest the king hear what has happened and be deeply grieved. We set sail again, and soon reached the same spot north of Koptos, the distance of a sheen. There, at the place where young Mat had fallen into the river, I too stepped out from under the awning of Pharaoh's bark and fell into the water. As I sank, I praised Ra, and once again, everyone on board cried out in sorrow. Word reached Neneferkifta. He came rushing out, recited a spell over me, and pulled me from the river. For the divine power still rested above the water. He recited another spell, brought me back to consciousness, and made me tell all that had happened and repeat Thoth's accusation to Ra. Then we returned to Ka. He had me taken to the house of the dead, ensured I received proper care, had me embalmed with all the honors due to someone of high rank, and laid me in the tomb beside the child Mahat. Neneferkfta then set out again. He quickly reached the same place north of Koptos, where we had both drowned. There he sat with his thoughts, and said to himself, "Would it not be better for me to return to Koptos and remain with them? If I go back to Memphis, and Pharaoh asks me about his children, what could I possibly say? Could I say this: I took your children to the Theban nome. They died, and I survived. I returned alone to Memphis, still alive." So he had a piece of fine royal linen brought to him. He crafted a magical binding from it, tied the book securely to his chest, and fixed it there. Then Neneferkfta stepped out from under the awning of Pharaoh's bark and threw himself into the river. As he sank and praised Ra, everyone on board let out a great cry of grief, saying, "Oh, what terrible sorrow! What immense loss! He is gone, the master scribe, the wise man, unmatched in knowledge." Pharaoh's bark continued on its journey, while no one in the world knew where Neneferkfta was. When the vessel reached Memphis, word was sent to Pharaoh, and he came down to the riverbank to meet it. He was dressed in mourning, and so were all the soldiers of Memphis, along with the priests of Ptah, the high priest, and all those who served around the king. Then they saw Neneferkfta, still fixed to the rudder oars of Pharaoh's bark by the power of his great knowledge as a master scribe. They lifted him from the vessel and found the book still fastened to his chest. Pharaoh ordered, "Take the book from his breast." The courtiers, the priests of Ptah, and the high priest all said to the king, "Oh, our great lord, may he live as long as Ra." This Neneferkfta was an exceptional scribe and a man of deep wisdom. Pharaoh had his body taken to the house of the dead, where it remained for 16 days. He was wrapped in fine linens for 35 days, then laid out in state for 70 days, and at last he was buried in his tomb among the dwellings of repose. Now, I have told you all the sorrows that came upon us because of this book you are asking for. You have no right to it because of that book. Our time on earth was cut short. Satni said, "Ahudi, give me that book I see between you and Neneferkfta. If you refuse, I'll take it by force." At that, Neneferkfta rose from his bed and said, "Are you not Satni, the one that woman warned telling you of the misfortunes you've yet to suffer? Do you think you can win this book through your skills as a scribe, or by besting me in a game? Then let us play for it." Satni agreed. A game board with its pieces was brought before them, and the two began to play. Neneferkfta won the first round. He spoke a spell over Satni, placed the board on top of him, and caused him to sink into the ground up to his legs. In the second round, Neneferkfta won again and made Satni sink into the ground up to his waist. Then, winning a third time, he caused Satni to sink all the way down to his ears. In desperation, Satni reached out and grabbed at Neneferkfta. He cried out to his foster brother Inaros, "Quickly, go to the surface. Tell Pharaoh what has happened to me. Bring me the sacred talismans of my father Ptah and my books of magic." Without delay, Inaros returned to the world above and told Pharaoh everything that had occurred. Pharaoh commanded, "Bring him the talismans of his father and his magical scrolls." Inaros descended once more into the tomb, placed the talismans on Satni, and Satni immediately rose back to the surface. Satni reached for the book and took it. As he emerged from the tomb, light shone ahead of him, and darkness followed behind. Ahuri wept and cried, "Glory to you, O darkness! Glory to you, O light! Everything has been taken from us. Everything that was in our tomb is gone." But Neneferkfta said to her, "Do not grieve. He will return this book in time, carrying a forked stick in his hand and a burning brazier on his head." Satni exited the tomb and sealed it behind him as it had been before. Then he went to Pharaoh and told him all that had happened because of the book. Pharaoh said to him, "Return the book to Neneferkfta's tomb like a wise man should. If not, he will make you bring it back with a forked stick in your hand and a brazier burning on your head." But Satni paid no heed. He cared for nothing else in the world except to unroll the scroll and read it, no matter who it was for one day. As Satni was walking through the forecourt of the temple of Ptah, he saw a woman of extraordinary beauty. There was no other woman who could match her. She wore a great deal of gold was followed by young girls and attended by 52 servants. From the moment Satni laid eyes on her, he lost all sense of where he was or what he was doing. He turned to his page and said, "Go quickly to where that woman is and find out who she is." The page wasted no time and approached one of the maidservants walking behind the woman. He asked her, "Who is that woman?" She replied, "That is Tebui, daughter of the prophet of Bastet, lady of Nekatoi. She is going now to make her prayer before Ptah, the great god." When the page returned, he reported every word exactly as he had heard it. Satni said, "Go back and say this to the maidservant. Satni-Khamois, son of Pharaoh Uzimerez, sends me. He will give you 10 pieces of gold to spend an hour with him. And if persuasion fails, he will not hesitate to use force and take you to a hidden place where no one in the world will ever find you." The page returned to where Tebui was and delivered the message to the maid. She reacted with outrage, as if deeply insulted by the proposal. Then Tebui herself said, "Stop speaking to that miserable girl, speak to me instead." The page approached her and she said, "Tell Satni this, I am a temple servant, not a common woman. If he truly desires to be with me, he must come to Bubastis, to my house. Everything will be prepared there. He shall enjoy my company, and no one in the world will ever know of it, but I will not behave like a street woman." When the page returned to Satni and relayed her message word for word, Satni said, "Very well, I am satisfied." But all who were with him began to curse in disapproval. Satni ordered a boat to be brought, boarded it, and quickly set out for Bubastis. Upon arriving, he went to the western part of the city and came to a tall house surrounded by a wall. A garden lay to the north of it, and a staircase led up to the entrance. Satni asked, "Whose house is this?" and was told it belongs to Tebui. He entered the grounds and admired the beautiful pavilion in the garden. When news reached Tebui, she came down, took Satni by the hand, and said, "By my life, I am delighted that you have come to the house of the priest of Bastet, lady of Ankatawi. Come upstairs with me." Satni followed her up the stairs. The upper floor was spread with sand and powder made from real lapis lazuli and turquoise. Several beds were covered in royal linen, and golden cups stood on a stand. One cup was filled with wine and handed to Satni. Tebui asked, "Would you like to rest?" Satni replied, "That's not why I came." They lit fragrant wood and brought in fine perfumes, usually reserved for Pharaoh himself. Satni spent a joyful day with Tebui, having never seen anyone like her before. Then he said, "Let us now do what we came here to do." But she answered, "You may reach your home as it is now, but as for me, I am a temple servant, not a common woman. If you desire my company, you must make a formal contract of support and wealth, covering all your possessions." Satni replied, "Bring the school scribe." The scribe was brought at once, and Satni made a legal contract for Tebui's maintenance, giving her in writing all of his possessions. An hour later, someone came and told him, "Your children are downstairs," Satni said. "Let them come up." Tebui got up and dressed in a fine linen robe, and through the sheer fabric, Satni could see her entire body, which only heightened his desire. He said, "Now, let's fulfill the purpose of my visit," she said again. "You may return home as you are, but I am a temple servant, not a lowly woman. If you wish to be with me, your children must sign the contract as well, so they will not dispute my children over your estate." Satni had his children brought up and made them sign the contract. He said once more, "Now let us finally do what I came for." Tebui replied, "You may return home as you are, but I am not a mere woman. If you truly wish to have me, your children must be put to death, so they cannot quarrel with my children over your property." Satni said, "Let your will be done." So she had his children killed before his eyes and thrown out the window to be devoured by dogs and cats. Satni heard the animals feasting on their bodies while he sat drinking with Tebui. Again he said, "Everything you asked for has been done. Now let us be together," she said. "Come into this chamber." Satni entered the room and lay on a bed of ivory and ebony, ready to enjoy the reward of his longing. Tebui lay beside him, and as he reached out to touch her, she opened her mouth and screamed loudly. When Satni regained consciousness, he found himself in a furnace-like place, completely naked. After some time, he saw a towering figure standing on a raised platform. Surrounded by many attendants, he had the appearance of a pharaoh. Satni tried to stand, but couldn't bring himself to rise out of shame, for he was unclothed. The pharaoh said to him, "Satni, what condition are you in?" Satni replied, "It is Neneferkefta who caused all of this to happen to me." The pharaoh then said, "Go to Memphis. Your children are waiting for you. Look, they are standing before." "Pharaoh," Satni said, "my great lord the king, may your life be as long as that of Rahau. Can I go to Memphis when I have no clothing at all?" The pharaoh called over a servant nearby and ordered him to bring a garment for Satni. He then said, "Satni, go to Memphis. Your children are alive, and they stand before the king." Satni traveled to Memphis and embraced his children joyfully, grateful they were still alive. The pharaoh said, "Was it not drunkenness that led you to do all this?" Satni recounted everything that had happened to him with Tibui and Neneferkefta. The pharaoh said, "Satni, I warned you before. You did not return that book to the place from which you took it. You would be destroyed. But you did not listen. Now return the book to Neneferkefta, carrying a forked staff in your hand and a lit brazier on your head." Satni left the pharaoh's presence, carrying the staff and the brazier, and descended into the tomb of Neneferkefta. Ahuri greeted him, saying, "It is Ptah, the great god, who has brought you here safely." Neneferkefta laughed and said, "Did I not tell you this would happen?" Satni began to speak with Neneferkefta, and as they talked, he realized that the tomb had become completely illuminated with sunlight. Ahuri and Neneferkefta spoke at length with Satni. Then Satni said, "Neneferkefta, what you ask of me is deeply humiliating." Neneferkefta replied, "You know well that Ahuri and her child Merab are at Coptos, and yet they are also here in this tomb preserved by the skill of a master scribe. Now I ask you to undertake the task of going to Coptos and bringing them back here." Satni emerged from the tomb and went to see Pharaoh. He reported everything that Neneferkefta had told him. Pharaoh said, "Satni, go to Coptos and bring back Ahuri and her child Merab." Satni replied, "Let me have Pharaoh's royal boat and its crew." Pharaoh granted his request. Satni boarded the boat, set out immediately, and made his way to Coptos without delay. When the priests of Isis in Coptos and the high priest heard of his arrival, they came down to meet him at the riverbank. Satni disembarked and went to the temple of Isis of Coptos and to Harpocrates. He brought offerings a bull, a goose, and some women-made burnt sacrifices and libations before Isis and Harpocrates. Then he went to the cemetery of Coptos with the priests and the high priest. They spent 3 days and 3 nights searching through the necropolis, examining the tombstones of the scribes of the double house of life and reading their inscriptions. But they could not find the burial chambers of Ahuri and her son Merib. Knowing they hadn't found the chambers, appeared to Satni in the form of an elderly priest, bent with age. He presented himself before Satni. Satni saw him and said, "You appear to be a very old man. Do you know where Ahuri and her child are buried?" The old man replied, "The father of my grandfather told my grandfather that the chambers of Ahuri and her child lie beneath the southern corner of the priest's house." Satni asked, "Are you trying to destroy the priest's house because he wronged you somehow?" The old man said, "Keep a careful watch over me while the house is taken down. If Ahuri and her child are not found beneath its southern corner, then treat me as a criminal." A close watch was kept on the old man. When they searched beneath the southern corner of the priest's house, they found the burial chamber of Ahuri and her child. Satni had their remains carefully transported to Pharaoh's boat. He then ordered that the priest's house be rebuilt, just as it had been before. Later, Neneferkefta revealed to Satni that it had been he who came to Coptos in the form of the old man to help him find the chamber of Ahuri, and her son Satni boarded Pharaoh's boat again. And they sailed back swiftly to Memphis with all the escort who had accompanied him. When Pharaoh was informed, he came down to meet them. He had Ahuri and her child carried to the tomb where Neneferkefta rested, and he sealed the upper chamber of the tomb just as it had been before. This complete tale, which tells the story of Satni-Khamois and Neneferkefta, as well as Ahuri and her son Merab, was written by the scribe Ziharpto in the 35th year. During the month of Tai by ***, the true story of Satni-Khamois and his son Sennacherib was found on Papyrus, DCIV, now housed In the British Museum, it was first published, transcribed, and translated into English by F.L.L. Griffith in Stories of the High Priests of Memphis, the Sethan of Herodotus, and the Demotic Tales of Khamois. This work was later analyzed, partially translated into French, and discussed by G. Maspero. Reveillat eventually transcribed the text into hieroglyphs and provided his own translation under the title The Romance of Sat. Second, Romance of Satni-Khamois. The tale appears on the back of 2 rolls of official documents written in Greek, dated to the 7th year of the reign of Emperor Claudius. Around 46-47 AD, these papyrus scrolls, once reused as scrap material, were joined end to end. The story was written on the unused parts of their reverse side. Unfortunately, the manuscript is damaged on the right-hand edge, and the beginning of the narrative is entirely lost. Based on the style of handwriting, the copy likely dates from the latter half of the 2nd century AD. The script is large and somewhat unsteady, careful in appearance, but awkward in execution. Nevertheless, it is legible. The language used in the story is straightforward and clear, though less refined than that of the earlier tale. Asterisk, asterisk, the entire first page is missing, along with a significant portion of the second page. However, the general subject of the narrative can still be reasonably reconstructed. The rest of the text is marred by many gaps, making the story difficult to follow at times. Thanks to Mr. Griffith's thorough and meticulous work, we are able to understand the broader storyline and accurately restore many of the missing details. As is my usual practice, I have filled in the missing parts briefly, clearly marking where the original text begins. There once lived a king named Osiris. May he live and prosper. Among his children was a son named Satme, a gifted scribe known for the skill of his hands and his vast knowledge. He surpassed all others in the crafts mastered by Egyptian scribes, and no sage in the entire land could rival his wisdom. One day, the rulers of foreign lands sent a messenger to Pharaoh with this challenge. My lord asks who, in your land, is capable of performing a task he has devised under specific conditions. If someone in Egypt completes it properly, my lord will acknowledge that his own country is inferior to Egypt. But if no capable scribe or wise man in Egypt can do it, then he will declare Egypt inferior to his land. When King Osiris heard this, he summoned his son Satme and repeated the message. Without hesitation, Satme gave the correct answer to the challenge posed by the foreign ruler. The messenger had no choice but to admit that his own country was inferior to Egypt. From that moment on, none of the foreign rulers who had once sent messengers could overcome Satme's brilliance. His wisdom was so renowned that no ruler in the world dared to send further challenges to Pharaoh. After some time, Satme and his wife Mautuashkat remained without a son, and this deeply troubled Satme's heart. His wife Mautuashkat shared in his sorrow. One day, when Satme was feeling especially downcast, Mautuashkat went to the temple of Imas, the son of Ptah, who performs miracles, who is kind in all your deeds. You are the one who gives children to those who are barren. Hear my plea and grant me a son. That night, Mautuashkat slept in the temple and had a dream. In it, a voice spoke to her, saying, "Are you not Mautuashkat, wife of Satme, who sleeps here seeking a cure for your barrenness from the god's hand? When morning comes, go to your husband Satme's bathhouse. There you will find a colocasia root growing. Take it, leaves and all, prepare it into a remedy, and give it to your husband. Then lie with him, and you will conceive that same night." When Mautuashkat awoke from the dream, she did exactly as instructed. She lay with her husband Satme, and she conceived. When the signs of pregnancy appeared, Satme was overjoyed and informed Pharaoh to protect her. He tied an amulet around her and spoke a spell over her. One night, Satme himself dreamed. In the dream, a voice told him, "Mautuashkat, your wife, who has conceived by you, will bear a child named Osiris. He will perform many wonders in the land of Egypt." Satme woke, filled with joy. When the months of pregnancy had passed and the time came, Mautuashkat gave birth to a son. The news was brought to Satme, and he named the boy Osiris, as he had been told in his dream. The child was immediately given to his mother to nurse, and was nourished by her dot as Osiris grew. He amazed all who saw him at 1 year old. He seemed like he was 2. At 2, One would think him 3, so strong and developed were his limbs. Satme came to love him so deeply that he could hardly go an hour without seeing his son. When Osiris grew older and stronger, he was sent to school. In no time, he surpassed the knowledge of the scribe who taught him. He began reading magical texts with the scribes of the double house of life at the temple of Ptah, and all who listened to him were astonished. Satme took great pleasure in bringing him to festivals before Pharaoh, where Osiris would challenge the magicians of Pharaoh's court. In every contest, he outshone them all and became the foremost among them. One day, as Satme was washing himself on the roof of his home in preparation for a festival, his young son Osiris was bathing alongside him, also getting ready to attend. At that very moment, Satme heard a loud cry of mourning. Looking out from the rooftop, he saw a wealthy man being carried to his burial in the mountain with great ceremony and many mourners. Then he looked down again, and this time he saw a poor man being taken out of Memphis. Wrapped simply in a mat, without a single person walking behind him, no one to mourn or honor him. Moved by the contrast, Satme said, by the life of Osiris, Lord of the afterlife, may I be treated in the land of the dead like the rich, who are mourned with great ceremony, and not like the poor, who are buried without honor. But Osiris replied, May what happens to you in the afterlife be like what happens to that poor man, and not like what happens to the rich man. Hearing this, Satme was troubled. Are these the words of a son who loves his father? He asked. Osiris responded, If it pleases you, I can show you where both the poor man and the rich man now dwell. Satme asked, And how will you do that, my son Osiris? Then Osiris began to recite from his magical texts. He took his father's hand and led him to a place in the mountain of Memphis that Satme had never seen before. This place held 7 great halls, filled with people of every station in life. They passed through the first 3 halls without being stopped. When they entered the 4th, Satme saw strange sights. Some people were chased and harassed while donkeys fed behind them. Others had food, water, and bread hanging just out of reach, and they jumped to get it. Still others dug holes beneath themselves, preventing them from reaching the sustenance they needed. In the 5th hall, Satme saw the spirits of the dead, each in their assigned place. Those who had committed crimes stood at the entrance, pleading for mercy. The pivot of the door was set upon the right eye of a man who cried out in pain as he prayed in the 6th hall. Satme beheld the gods who judged the souls of the people of the afterlife. They sat in their places while the gatekeepers of the underworld called forth the cases of the dead. When they entered the 7th hall, Satme saw the image of Osiris, the great god, seated on a throne of pure gold, crowned with a diadem adorned. With 2 feathers, Anubis stood on his left, Thoth on his right, and the divine council flanked him on both sides. In front of them stood a great balance, where good and evil deeds were weighed. Thoth acted as the scribe, while Anubis spoke to the assembled judges. Those whose evil deeds outweighed their good were handed over to Ammit, the beast who belonged to the lord of the underworld. Their souls and bodies were destroyed, and they were denied the breath of life. Those whose good deeds were greater were welcomed into the company of the gods of the divine council, and their souls ascended to the heavens to dwell among the honored dead for those whose merits and faults were equal. They were placed among the blessed spirits, who wore protective amulets and served Osiris. Then Satme noticed a noble figure, dressed in fine linen, standing near the presence of Osiris in a place of great honor. As Satme stood in awe of everything he had seen in Osiris, Osiris stepped before him and said, Father Satme, do you see that dignified man in fine linen, standing close to Osiris? That is, the poor man you saw being carried out of Memphis, alone, wrapped in a mat. He was brought to the afterlife, and when his misdeeds were weighed against the good he had done in life, his virtues were found to be greater, since the happiness he experienced on earth did not match the long lifespan that Thoth had assigned to him. Osiris gave the order for the rich man's funerary possessions, the one you saw honored in Memphis, to be transferred to this poor man. He was then placed among the blessed spirits under the care of Osiris, near Osiris himself. As for that rich man you saw, he too was judged in the afterlife. But when his misdeeds were weighed, they outweighed his virtues, so he was condemned to punishment in Ammit. He is the one you saw, with the pivot of the fifth hall's door resting on his right eye, turning on it, whether open or shut, while he cries out in torment by the life of Osiris. Great God and Lord of Amentet, when I told you on earth, may what happens to that poor man happen to you, and not what happens to that rich man. It was because I already knew what their fates would be. Satme replied, My son Senesiris, I have seen many wonders in Amentet. Now tell me, who are those people running about while donkeys feed behind them? And who are the others whose food, bread, and water hang above them as they jump to reach it, while someone digs holes beneath them to stop them? Senesiris answered, Truly, my father Satme, those you saw running while the donkeys ate behind them represent people in the world who live under divine curse. They labor night and day for food, but their wives steal from them, so they never have enough to eat. In Amentet, they relive the same hardship. They are found to have more misdeeds than virtues. And what happened to them in life happens again after death. Asterisk, asterisk, and those others you saw, who leap for food hanging above them while someone digs holes beneath them to prevent them from reaching it. These are like people who had their food before them in life, yet divine forces blocked them from ever obtaining it. In Amentet, the same obstacles repeat. So if it pleases you, my father, know this. Those who do good on earth receive good in Amentet, and those who do evil are repaid with evil. These fates are fixed forever. What you see in the underworld of Memphis is unchanging, and such things occur in the 42 nomes where the gods of Osiris's divine council dwell. When Senesiris had finished speaking to his father Satme, he led him up to the mountain of Memphis, holding him close with their hands clasped together. As they ascended, Satme asked, My son Senesiris, is the path we descend by different from the one we used to climb up? But Senesiris gave him no reply, not a single word. And Satme was left pondering everything his son had said. He thought to himself, Surely this child will become one of the blessed spirits and a servant of the god. When I go to the afterlife, I will say, This is my son. Then Satme recited a formula from the book to ward off spirits of the dead, and he remained in the deepest wonder over all he had witnessed in Amentet. Yet his heart was heavy, for he could not share these visions with anyone in the world. When the young boy Senesiris reached the age of 12, there was no scribe or magician in all of Memphis who could rival him in the reading of magical texts.